Hello everyone, I'll be uploading two quick videos tonight. This is the first one. This is the inaugural game of the London Chess League online, and I believe this is actually the second division, but it's now become a lot more popular and there's a lot more advertising and fanfare around it. I am playing for one of the East Ham teams, and I was on board one. It's a 4-board match, just like the other chess league I play in, with 45 minutes and a 15-second increment, played on Tornello, so there are a few teething problems, and that meant that our board 4 actually got defaulted because he wasn't able to log in and get to the board in time, so that we had our work cut out for us. I'm playing Carsten Pedersen, who is an excellent player. He plays for Hammersmith in the Middlesex League. I believe he's around 2,200 and 200 ECF. So he was white. He played e4. I chose a Caracan, c6, d4, d5, trading, going into the exchange caro, bishop d3, knight c6, and c3 going into the main line. Now, queen c7 is a popular move and is probably the most popular these days, but I may have misremembered. I've had a vague memory that he'd told me this was a line he'd studied a lot. So I didn't go for queen c7, I went for knight f6, which is the second, the alternative line. Bishop f4, preventing queen c7, and black's idea of shoving e5 early on to gain space. I attack the queen. White gets out of the way and attacks the b-pawn. I defend. Knight d2, ready to go knight f3 without me doubling up the pawns. I play e6, knight f3, so if I take with the bishop, they'll take back with the knight. Bishop d6 to trade pieces, and this goes into a fun line if they take me. Taking it's a move, it's okay, but I've never had a lot of problems as black, because I can play rook b8 for 1, and then I can take on b2 fairly soon. But I also have castles kingside as well. And actually my own sort of line is I quite like castling kingside straight away, and then playing rook b8 in the future. So even though black's down a pawn, they have a lot of compensation and better development for the pawn. Instead he played knight e5, and I sidestepped, not losing my queen. And then a flurry of exchanges. Knight takes bishop. I don't want white having two bishops on the board, so I take their bishop. They take my knight, check, I take back, and then white moves their knight to f3. And we get a funny looking position where both of us have not yet castled, but we don't want to be the first ones to castle. If I go queenside, white can easily play a4, b4 and chuck their pawns at me. If I castle kingside, I've weakened my king with my doubled f-pawns, so I could be in danger. And same thing for white. They actually can't castle queenside right now, but if they do castle queenside in the next couple of moves, I will also castle queenside, and white's shoving their pawns up could weaken their own king. And if they castle kingside very soon, then I can play rook g8 and then line up with their king on the g file and get the attack. So both of us start wasting a couple of turns, trying to maneuver our pieces around. And then I play f5, making the bishop less powerful. Finally white castles, and I go queenside. Rook f1, fe1. I'm not sure this is the right move, but it makes some sense to put the rook in the centre of the board. I play king b8, setting a trap, but he doesn't fall for it. He prevents me taking on h2 ever with the bishop. I play rook g8 as planned. And here, my trap was if bishop takes pawn, where I can't take back because the queen would get my king. I'm pinned. I play knight a5, and if their queen moves off the b file, I can take the bishop. If b5 is chosen by the queen, which is the only safe square for it, king a7, and then their bishop has nowhere to go. If they counterattack my knight, I save it. And again, their bishop has nowhere to be, so queen a4, and then I can take the pawn. And if b5 attempting to fight back, I can easily attempt to trade queens, and I have a clear advantage as black. In the game, Carsten chose the move a4. He's ready to shove his pawns. I went rook g6, bishop f1, a safety move for white. Rook to g8. Both rooks are lined up with the king. I could have a huge attack fairly soon. Queen c2. He's letting his b and c pawns run up the board, but also having the queen more centralized. Knight e7. I'm ready to bring the knight over to the area around the king. And then here I missed the key move, which is not easy to find. How would you plan to get your knight over towards the white king? What would you play as black in this position? So the computer and I differ, but we have the same general plan. We want to go to g6 with our knight, which is currently occupied by the rook. I played rook h6 in the game to then threaten rook takes pawn, because again their g-pawn is pinned to their king, a bit like the trap that I set for white in the position a few moves ago. But it turns out that I should actually simply shuffle backwards and keep my rooks safe, then go knight g6, even though it blocks in both my rooks. And then I have knight f4, where I get a devastating attack on the king, and can then grab the pawn with a very strong advantage. But my move rook h6 apparently makes the game practically equal, although I think if you leave the computer on long enough, it actually gives black a very small edge. So knight g6, queen e3 attacking the rook. This is the reason that rook to g7, not to h6 is preferred. I play knight f4 anyway, and knight e5 is chosen by white. I'm still threatening maybe taking on h3 in a lot of positions. White's knight e5 is attempting to keep my bishop and queen out of the attack. I do capture, and white takes back. Then I defend the knight using the rook. I'm playing rather provocatively here, hoping that white may stumble and play the wrong move. g3, for example, is very awkward because I take on h3 then with my knight, I think. Or even my rook, actually, might be better. Rook to d1. Queen d8. So I'm attempting to bring the queen over. And now g3 was very effective. Apparently, if I leave things too long, white can play rook d4. But also I'm having lots of stuff attacked. So I now chose knight h3. White captured my rook, which I think is the only move. Knight h to f2. King g2, getting out of check. Knight takes rook, winning back a little bit of material. So if we stop to evaluate the position at this moment, I have lost a knight in exchange for a pawn or so. However, the white king is a lot weaker than the black king. So if I can blast my way through, I may get an advantage or even a winning attack. I tried f4. At this moment I had 20 minutes and Carsten only had about 5. Which has happened in most of our games previously. I think we've played 4 times, and I've drawn 3, and I think I've won 1 game. So draws are very common with us. Rook d4 was played, which I didn't see. I thought he would play rook d3 to guard the pawn. He let me have it though. Check. And king f2 is apparently not as good as king h2, but I get his reasoning, which is to run to his pawns on c and b. If he can put his king on, say, b1 or c1, he should be fine. And here I defended my pawn, hoping that he would take it, and I might end up with a position I can actually play. But offered a draw at the same time, and he was a bit nervous, I think, of his king being so weak, so he ended up taking the draw. It's not easy for white to play, because the simple rook takes pawn could easily fall victim to queen b6 check. And if a move like king e1, that's a huge blunder because of queen to e3 check, winning the rook. And if a move like rook d4 is played by white, I probably have multiple moves that are good for me. Queen takes b2 is probably very, very strong. And then his king doesn't have many squares. If bishop e2, I can then grab this rook as well. And maybe white can play queen f8. And then queen c5. And he ends up picking up the rook. But even then, I might have. I would have to analyse this very deeply, but I might even have Queen b6, because the point is that if something like Queen takes Rook, I can take the Queen, take, and then suddenly my King goes for the A pawn, and it's not totally obvious that it's winning for White. So that could be very scary, but I also don't need to take the Rook as well. I'm sure there's other moves available to me. And also I can simply take the Rook first, which is probably the move I would have done in the game. I think White has to take, and then I can take on d4 with, I think, with at least an equal position. Maybe King, I'm not even sure where the King goes. King f3 might be correct. And then I can take on either e5 or maybe b2 is better. I don't know which one's better, but I have enough pawns, I think, to maybe get a draw. So it was a good game. We actually ended up winning the match despite our board 4 being defaulted, because I drew, and then our boards 2 and our board 3 both won their matches. So overall, it was a fairly good start to the London League on Tornello, and hopefully no one will get defaulted next round. It's very well organised, and yeah, hope to put more videos on this YouTube channel, which will be analysis of the games I've played in the London League. So thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.